Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Freeing Your Mind podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Dukeman, and this week I have with me Mr. Michael Collins. Mike, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Doing good. So let's dive right in. Mike and I have actually never met. Um, we connected through our coaching group, and Mike had a story that was worth sharing, which everybody has a story worth sharing, but we talked really briefly, about a week ago, and decided to put this episode together. So, Mike, let's just dive right in and tell us about yourself.
Okay, so starting off, I grew up in a traumatic household, I guess you could say, is drug infested, abuse, neglect. The number one thing that came to my family was just all drugs. Dad had anger issues, a lot of domestic violence. Any little thing out of line, my brother and I were getting beat on, hit, and everything else, and as quick as I could, I got out of that, and that was when I turned 18. I joined the Navy because where we grew up, there wasn't money for school or anything like that. It was I needed to get out of there, or else I saw my life going down that same path that I was raised in, and that's not something that I wanted. Luckily, I was able to see that early on, and
Mhm.
then joined the Navy. I was in the Navy for 4 years, and then after the Navy, I got out. I worked a few different jobs, but I'd always wanted to be a cop. So I went and became a police officer. I was a police officer for 5 years. And the only reason I got out of that is just better family time and, a better financial situation for the family.
Mhm.
It's hard to be a great dad and a cop at the same time because, most of the time I had like a Tuesday and Wednesday off and I worked midnight and you get to see your kids here and there. And it's hard.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I hear that. Night shift is no fun for anybody. Um, it's like from my experience with it, it's kind of like you spend the first couple days of your shift getting used to nights, and then you spend most of your days off getting used to days so you can be with the
Yep.
family, just to turn around and do it again, which in turn really just puts you in a constant state of being like a zombie.
Just
So
yeah, sleep deprivation.
yep.
Which I
Yeah.
mean, I did enjoy night shift. I mean, that's where
Mm.
all the fun stuff's gonna
Yeah,
happen.
very true.
And but the other aspect of it is it didn't work well for my family life. So
Mhm.
I mean, it's you had to choose one. So
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. So you talked a little bit about your childhood and the trauma and like a little bit of that background, and so obviously you've overcome that. So let's just dive a little bit deeper into that story and kind of, I don't know, I guess we'll paint a picture of kind of the things that you've experienced and how that led to where you are now.
so one of the stories I tell, and it's one of my earliest childhood memories, is I think around 5, and my father had just finished beating my mother. I mean, I was laying, it's nighttime. I don't know exactly what time, but I was laying in bed. My dad beat up my mother. I could hear it all. I know
Mhm.
I'm old enough to know what's going on.
Mhm.
And, she comes in the room and she grabs me and she huddles down in the corner with me and she's sitting there crying over me. And the words she said to me have stuck with me to this day. She said, "Please don't ever grow up to be like your father." And that right there, I mean, it rings through my head all the time. Like anytime you're faced with a decision you got to make, I mean, is this going to make me a better man or is this going to make me a worse man? Is this the kind
Mhm.
of life that I live or is this that the kind of life that I want to go down? And it's I have kids of my own, and anytime I like kids frustrate you. It's
Oh
just
yeah.
it's part of it. But and anytime like I start getting frustrated and you that those words ring through your heads like please don't ever grow up to be like your father. And it's shitty that that's my first like earliest childhood memory. I don't really remember a whole lot from my like early childhood.
Mhm.
We moved around a lot. I remember getting woken up by cops in the middle of the night coming through the house with flashlights and just I don't remember the instance why, but it's just I was waking up in my race car bed by cops with flashlights. So
Yeah.
there was also a lot of abuse on my end. My brother had spina bifida when he was born, so I was kind of like the whipping boy. So I got the frustration. When he was able to, he finally was able to walk after surgery, and he got his fair share of abuse as well. And when I say abuse, it's far beyond like, spanking your kid's ass.
Mm.
It's I've been thrown through walls, beat upside the head. It's just, and like I said, I saw a lot of that, and then as I grew older, I started realizing, why the doors are locked all the time, and why there's extra locks on their room. They're in there doing, dope and shit they're not supposed to be doing. And you start figuring these things out as a kid, and you have to grow up. You realize you have to mature a lot quicker than some people do.
Mm.
Like I've seen my, like, even my kids, they're all ages, but my kids haven't had to witness, the stuff that I've gone through,
Mm.
the stuff that, their worst nightmare is getting their phone taken away because they got in trouble. Not, are the cops coming again tonight? I mean,
Yeah.
there was another story I told before too. It was my brother's second birthday. My parents had split up, and my dad, they were supposed to swap. Like, I was supposed to go with my mother, I think, or vice versa. So each parent had a kid. Well, my dad threw both of us in the truck and took off. Well, when he took off, my mom fell out of the truck. The cop saw it. I guess he was on the other side of the street and tried to stop my dad. Dad said, I ain't stopping. And 40 miles later, we made it to our house, with probably 15 to 20 cop cars behind us. And yeah, I was 7 when that happened.
Wow.
And no bullshit. We were on the highway, and I remember it vividly that Highway to Hell by AC/DC was playing, and I'll never forget it.
So you were definitely exposed to a lot of things as a child that no one should be exposed to,
Yeah.
especially not as a child. Um, and how did that transition? Like, was there a point in your life where, like, I mean, growing up, did you perceive this as normal, or did you always know it wasn't normal? Was there a point where you figured out that it wasn't?
It it started I started realizing that, yes, this ain't normal. But, I had friends and stuff growing up, but it was never like, I didn't spend days and weeks at other people's houses and kind of see how, their life is. It was just, we're
Mm.
friends at school or whatever. Because when I was with my dad and I was old enough to work, like, we lived in the country, we had animals to take care of. My dad, my he was a functioning drug addict because, he ran a construction business, and he did a lot of work because he was
Mm.
high on meth. But
Yeah.
anytime there was work to be done, I got paid by a roof over my house. And I mean, I was always having to work for dad or work at the house, and I didn't have a lot of free time to even see like how other people live. You interact with people at school, but you don't get to see a lot of how people live at home. And
Mm.
there was a point, I was like, this doesn't feel right. And as I got older, it got worse and worse. And and I was actually talking to a friend about this the other day. I had a friend that reached out to me and had some questions because he's seen how I've turned my life around. And I was talking to him, and I said, man, and I actually I went to high school with a guy, and I told him, I said, back then I was like, nobody knew it, but I would lay there at night trying to figure out how I was going to kill myself because
Mm.
I I was like, that felt like the only option. And this was after 2004. So, another more history is my grandfather, my dad's dad, but they all live next door to us. My dad's dad, my papa, was really the only positive role model that I had in my life. He
Mm.
wasn't. I mean, he was a hard worker, and he was just, just one of them old fashioned, just, blunt, honest men. And he cared for you, but he wasn't going to tell you he loves you all the time and give you hugs, but you felt the love coming from him, just his actions. Well, he passed away in '04, and that was really the only, I guess, like, handle that I had to hold on to in life, like, to maintain my sanity, was my pawpaw, because that was some sort of escape to, I guess, away from my reality. And then he
Mm.
passed away in '04, And then after that, I just kind of like I said, I would lay there at night. I just figuring out how to take my life. Like I didn't feel like I wanted to be here anymore.
Mm. So how did that transition? Because you didn't stick around long after you got out of high school.
No, I turned 18 during the summer after I graduated, and 3 weeks after my 18th birthday, I was headed to boot camp for the Navy. I just, like I said earlier, I saw what my future, kind of like a crystal ball view of what my future would look like if I stayed around and just
Mm.
followed down the same path as my family. Because I have a big family. My dad's the youngest of seven, and most of my cousins and aunts and uncles, I had one aunt, I never saw her much because she was smart enough to get the hell away from everybody a long time ago, before I was born.
Mm.
And the rest of them, I mean, it was all the same stuff. And like, I see other family members now that they didn't make it out of that reality. They got sucked into that reality, and that's the life that they went down.
Mm.
And I knew I didn't want that. And that's, like I said, as soon as I could, I was actually 17 when I signed the papers. My parents had to sign it too. They signed it, and like I said, 3 weeks after I turned 18, I was off to boot camp.
So in some ways, I mean, that's your parents, at least, whether they knew that they were sending you on a better path, or whatever their thought process was, they agreed to it,
Yeah.
which is, a blessing there that worked out that
Yeah.
way for you.
And I look back at it now, and like I still I communicate with my mother, and she's made her fair share of mistakes. I've, as a man, I make mistakes too. My dad's done his, and I've forgiven them for everything. And there's no doubt in my mind that my parents love me, but it's they were young, they got into the wrong part of life, and they chose other shit over their children. And
Mm.
it just, I mean, it's something that I had to deal with.
Yeah.
It's something that I still deal with. I mean, stuff like that never goes away. You just learn the systems and the processes of how to, handle those things. And that's something I'm sure we're going to get into.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And so at what point did you feel like, I mean, you went into the Navy, went to boot camp. Was that the point when you started processing and dealing with these things, or did you have
It
more
was,
years ahead of you?
it was, I would say it was probably 2, 3 years in. Um, I didn't always make the best choices. Like when I joined the Navy, and a little back history on that is, and looking at, now that I'm older, I think that was just me, you know, going out and enjoying freedom, something that I never had,
Mm.
living out my childhood and just going out having fun. I never learned anything about money growing up. I never learned. I knew how to work hard. That's all my dad ever taught me. That's all my
Mm.
papa taught me. I didn't know anything about, much responsibility. It's just I knew how to work hard, and that's all I had going for me. So I mean, I made a lot of, not criminal mistakes, but I made a lot of mistakes in my like in my early 20s, and 19, 20, 21, right in there. Just stuff that, if I wish I had learned when I was younger, because it would have gave me a hell of a lot better foundation, to build upon now as an adult.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we certainly all, regardless of our background, there's always things that we aren't taught. And some
Yeah.
of it's just our bullheadedness too. Like, I mean, maybe we were taught, but we just chose not to listen until we
Hmm.
figured that lesson out on our own the hard way,
Yeah.
which often is the ones that stick the most because somebody told you so, and you just chose to go, yeah, no, that's not the case until you find out
Oh
that
yeah,
it
I know.
is. So,
I have 3 boys, and my oldest, he's the easiest. He's been the easiest child ever. I mean, he's 17 now.
mm,
I never even gave him a bedtime. He would just go to bed at like 8:30 because he was tired. But then, I
mm,
mean, you tell him one time and he learned. I mean,
yeah,
that's how he worked. My middle child is not that way. He is stubborn. He's getting older. He's maturing now, and you see it progressing. And as like the conversations, between your kid and everything, you see him getting better. But he hit terrible twos and he didn't come out for a while.
Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely a thing. And each one's different. So it's been fascinating watching my three girls grow and how they're each so different. And they all unite on something, but they are very
Yeah.
much their own humans with their own personalities and will each learn life's lessons in their own way.
Yep.
So you got out of the Navy, got through that, made some mistakes.
Yeah.
What
I
did you
worked
do?
in, so I was in Texas. I worked a lot of some oil field jobs and stuff because that's really what was hiring back then.
Mm,
And I actually in 2000, so right after I got out, I applied for Fort Worth Police Department, and their process, like there's 2,500 people that take the test. I mean,
mm,
it's a long drawn out process. Well, about 8 months later, I finally get a call. They're like, "Hey, we want you to come in." And I went in, I did my physical and everything. And they're like, "Well, this is what you're going to get paid while you're going through the academy and everything." And by that time, I was, making some oil field money, and I'm like,
mm.
"Ooh, that's a big pay cut, like, 30, $40,000 a year pay cut." And I was
Yeah.
like, now that's another one of them young mistakes. And it's one of those, like, I don't really have regrets, but it's one of those I may have done different if I was younger, but it's everything's led me to where I am now, and I'm
Yeah.
happy with that.
Yep. Absolutely.
But it took a while, and then I finally, like, that dream always just lived in the back of my head, and that's something that I wanted to do. And then I was headed to work one day, and I see a sign that says "Join the Blue." I was like, and it had their website on it, and I was like, all right, I'll give it another shot. And then it was the only department I applied to. Took the test, and then they were hiring for two spots, and then me and another guy were the top on the top of the test. So I got the job, and I was there for right at 5 years.
Nice. And so obviously some of the traumatic stuff continues because that line of
Yeah.
work does not go without exposure.
No, and so back to managing that stuff when I was a child is I started like in the military. You work out a lot, so
Mhm.
and I think that's a lot of what kind of held that depression off. But when you realize you get to the point like, okay, I'm getting out in like my fourth year, like I ain't got
Mhm.
to be put as much effort into it. And then once like my fitness level started declining and my activity started declining, my diet and what I was eating started getting worse, and that's when everything started hit me. And it was a little while, and I'm like, well, maybe that's what helped me before manage everything. So, I started working out again, and I started eating right. I went from 217 pounds to 170 and lost weight. And I was able to maintain that for quite some time and didn't really have any issues emotionally. I mean, stuff comes back. It's always going to be there in the back of your head, but I was able to manage everything that had happened in my path at that point with, physical activity and just, taking better care of myself. Like, you take care of your body and your mind. I mean, it'll go, just those two things alone go a long way.
Oh, absolutely.
And then so in 2019, I was still an officer. My little brother, my only brother, he got killed in a car accident, and he was 26 years old. And that's what this whole tattoo is about. It's a memorial piece for him. But he got killed in a car accident, and I I went off the deep end. Like, I don't think I worked out once after that for
Mhm.
at least a couple years. Like, I just, that was my little brother, and it took a long time. And there was a point in my life I couldn't even say his name or think about him without crying. Like, I would just go down that dark hole, and then the depression was just, I mean, relentless. It was just constantly, it was just, you're numb. I mean, it's, and you know how to fix it, or at least I knew how to help myself out of it for a portion of it, but you can't get
Mm.
yourself there, and it's a hard thing to do. Is you're just numb, and then plus, I mean, this is towards the end of my law enforcement career, so you have my childhood's back in full force. Everything that I dealt with as a cop is in full force. The grief of losing my brother is, and I mean, it happened right down the road from my house, and it's just, and I had to drive by the spot every day, so it's not like I can't escape it. Like it was
Yep.
just there, and I see the big oak tree, and the bark's just ripped off of it from where he hit a tree, and it's like every single day. Like
Mm.
God, but so it took me just over 3 years after that to finally, I said, this is enough. Like my wife's pregnant now, and I mean, our child's going to be born no later than next week. So I
Mm.
mean, she's coming soon. But I finally, I you have to take that first step, and you reason with yourself when you're in those holes, like, oh, you got to do this, but you never do it. And
Mm.
then, well, this is what you need to talk to somebody, but you don't reach out because I mean, you think that nobody cares. I mean, there's so many resources that are out there, but everybody thinks they're alone. They're
Mm.
just, even with a wife who was by my side, who asked me to talk, like who was willing to, with open ears for me to, spill it all out. And I know, and I guarantee she'd still be by my side today if I'd just done it. But you just live in that darkness. But finally, I was able to. I pulled out a journal and I just started writing down. And I don't remember. I think I was listening to a podcast. I don't remember what podcast it was, and I just started writing about like where I want to go, like what I want to do. And that was the first, I guess, sub step, and that kind of gave me a little bit of hope. And then my enough is enough point was like my weight had gotten so bad, and I've had like issues with herniated disc and lower back pain for, I don't know, since early, right after not long after I got out of the Navy. Like it's something I
Mm.
dealt with, but I was always able to manage it. I took care of myself. I ate right. I wasn't fat as hell, but I got up to 235 pounds, and then one day, like my back just shut down. Like
Mm.
I couldn't move. Like I was crying. Like it was, and I was like, I told my wife that I got to go to the hospital, and so what I was trying to get, this is one of the first just like vulnerable moments for me, is like I couldn't put my own pants on.
Mm.
Like I'm 35 years old. I couldn't put fucking jeans on my legs. Like that's how bad it was. And to have my wife help me, and I'm thankful that she did, but just that just hurts your pride. You're a man. You should be able to put your damn. I mean, this is stuff you should do, and I'm not that old, and this is all stuff that I should be able to take care of. And she got me to the hospital, and I couldn't even walk in the hospital, and they ended up having to put me in a chair because I couldn't get myself through there, and they put me in a wheelchair. And I remember some young kid just rolling me through that fucking hospital in a wheelchair because I couldn't do it on my own. And that was the point. I said, that's it. This is enough. And after that, I didn't start working out right away, but I started, eating right away because I couldn't. It took me a while to get my back in a position where I could actually put some weight on it and mobility and everything else. But I started losing weight. I started meditating, which is all things that I've known how to do. I've meditated before, and it's nothing that I ever maintained as long as I should have.
Mm.
But yeah, I had knowledge of it, and I knew it helped, but it's just something I let go. And then once I could, started working out. I started, just walking, I
Mm.
just getting active, doing what you could do, and then journaling, and then I do ice baths as well, and just those things. Like, I mean, building the discipline to keep them going every single day. It it puts you in such a better mindset that when those demons do try to start talking to you, you can say, "Get the fuck out of here," and just get away, and you keep on going through your day.
Yep. It's amazing what that structured day and consistency will really do for you when things get
Yeah.
bad. Um, and even just like in the, when you're in the phases of building that up, when those things hit, it might set you back when those things hit, but you at least kind of recognize it that no,
Yes.
I need to get back to my routine. And then you're like, oh man, I feel better. And so doing those things every day, I mean, for me, I can't see my life without having that consistent routine. And I find
Yeah.
myself just fine tuning it and changing it up to just make little improvements and things that just add value to it and just make me that much more whole.
Yeah. And I think a lot of the ability to see that does come from the meditation, because
Absolutely.
when you're and for people that, and I had another conversation with another friend that reached out to me this morning, just asking me like, "Hey man, like, I see you posting on Facebook, like," and he's like, "You look great." Like, and then he asked me about diet and stuff first, and then he asked me, he he became vulnerable, which I've known him for a while. It's hard to do, and he
Absolutely.
became vulnerable, and he said, "Man, he's like, I've had a lot of issues with some anxiety." He's like, I don't know what to do." And me and him had about an hour long conversation this morning, and I went through with him, and I told him, I was like, the biggest thing for me when it comes to the depression and anxiety is, and the thoughts that come with them, is the meditation.
Mhm.
Just because, and you set and focus, and I've done different kinds of meditation, but let's just say, mindful breathing. You focus on your breathing, and everybody's going to drift off.
Mhm.
It's not, oh, if I drift off, I'm not doing it right. No, when you drift off and you realize it, and you
Yep.
come back to your breath, that's the best part. When you
Yep.
realize it and are able to redirect your focus to
Mhm.
what you're there for, that right there, just that little ability is what it helps you out when those, like I said, those the mind starts racing and the thoughts start coming in, and, oh, I'm not good enough, or no, I shouldn't do that, or I mean, just all these negative things start rushing your head. You're like, no, no, that's, you can go away. You
Yep.
realize it for what it is, and then just send it on and keep going forward.
Yep. And that is huge. And that was I mean, that's a hard thing when you start out with meditation, I've found for me anyways, that
Yes.
your mind just wants to drift. And especially I always feel like my mind is super active. Growing up, like I always had a hard time paying attention in school because yeah, the teacher's talking about something, but if it just didn't absolutely captivate me, my mind would just
Oh yeah.
drift off and I'm gone. And then before I know it, I'm like, there's a test, and I'm like, I don't even, did we talk about this? Like, I don't remember any
Yes.
of it. And so to start out with meditation and just recognizing that drift and bringing it back and just subtly learning to bring it back, that just
Yeah.
like, hey, remember, focus, and not beating yourself up about it, but just
Yeah.
that subtle reminder, like, hey, we're over here. And then you're okay,
Yeah.
thanks. Good. And over time, like it just happens so naturally, like you start to something in my head there. You start to just recognize that you're drifting and you just catch it, and it's such an interesting thing too, because eventually you get so good at it that these periods of maybe before it was a minute that you could go before your mind started to wander, and then it's two, and then it's three, and then it's five. And like for me, a lot of times the first few minutes my mind is all over the place
Yeah.
and I'm trying to quiet it down. But on some of those longer meditations, those 10, 15, 20-minute meditations, like you just, for me, I find myself after I've quieted my mind down and kind of got all the chatter shut out and all the just wandering off chasing squirrels in my head, that I just find this clarity and just this
Hmm.
focus that it's I don't even know how to explain it, because it's not out of body, but it's not in body. It's just very much you're in
It's,
this space.
oh, I'm 100% like, I know exactly what you're talking about, and like you said, it is hard to explain. It's
Mm.
just you're there, you know you're there, and then damn, 15 minutes went by. Like,
Yeah,
holy
like
shit.
nothing. Yeah,
Yeah.
and just the clarity that comes from that. I mean, that I love setting my day, starting it off with that.
And I had some free time yesterday morning. And normally, like my routine in the morning is I get up, I get an ice bath, and then usually I'll meditate, and then I'll go to the gym. Sometimes those get reversed, and then start getting ready for work. And yesterday I just had more time, and I sat down and just like meditated with just no timer, no, I mean, just nothing, just sat there. And then when it was over, I was like, huh. And I looked at my watch. It had been 40 minutes.
Mm.
Most I'd ever met, like I normally 15, 20 minutes is like my daily what I do. And I may do little, 5 minutes here or there throughout the day if something just isn't feeling right and reset my mind. But if 40 minutes has went by and like you said, you're just in that place and
Yep.
it's like, whoa, that was cool.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. And I that's one of the things I love about weekends because I usually have more time. So I
Yeah.
don't have to worry about the clock and a schedule for the routine. I just get my day going and those are some of the best meditation sessions I have because there's
Yeah.
no rush. And I don't have to worry that I mean I have the day. I get up early enough on the weekends still that the kids are asleep for hours. Like usually I can get my whole routine done and be done with breakfast and everything before the kids are awake on the
Yeah.
weekends. So to just let the mind go and just get into that space for as long as it needs to be, it's yeah, it's just a great feeling and it just sets up
Mhm.
so much clarity in your head and just I feel like it's a great reset for the week too when you get those long ones in.
Oh yeah. And that's exactly what that was. Like the yesterday was an amazing day. I was just, you're just enjoying everything about life, like every little thing. And that's, another thing that I've worked into my life as well is gratitude. I just
Mm.
after that, I look around, I'm like grateful for everything. I mean, every little thing. And there was another guy I was listening to not too long ago, and he talked about being like you wake up if you wake up with gratitude, like you got another day
Yep.
and you could be grateful for that. Like you wake up and hey, I'm alive, I'm breathing, I got another day ahead of me. Like get out there, change somebody's life, change my life. I mean kids and another kid on the way. I mean, what's there not to be grateful for? And you look back at your old self and like you just want to go back and just like shake them, like get the fuck out of this and
Yeah.
come on. Like life is great. Like just come on, take my hand and let's go. And like I wish I had made that transformation in myself sooner. But I'm grateful that I'm here now. I'm grateful for the things that I've done. I'm grateful for how I feel. Like I can move around. I can go lift weights. I hate running. It's one of the things I got to get better at, but I can run. Um, and like it's a love hate relationship with the ice bath.
Yep.
Um, it this morning was a tough one, but it's when you finally finish and you make it to where you told yourself you're going to make it to, and you stick with it, you get more gratitude from that. Like,
Yep.
and then on top of that, you're building the discipline to keep this going every day, and
Mm.
it's just amazing. Like it's the gratitude is probably one of the biggest things too. Is just being able to enjoy your life and be thankful and grateful for the things that are around you.
Yeah, and I mean, like I have this journal that just sits on my desk, and I never journaled. I was never into it, and I decided it was something that I was going to do this year. And so I just write down, I don't do it every day now because I found that it was getting a bit redundant. But
Yeah.
just to start off for a few months every day, writing down 5 things I was grateful for and 5 things I loved about myself, that set such a tone and just changed. It was such a mindset shift for me that eventually I realized that the things that I was grateful for, like I just knew they were there and I didn't have to remind myself. And where I, like you talked about being done with meditation and just recognizing all these things, where they start to flow because you've shifted your mindset and in the pattern of
Yeah.
thought to where that's just it's like the attitude of gratitude, right? Like it's
Yeah.
just you've ingrained it in yourself. You've created that habit to where you stop looking at the negatives and stop, it because I mean we just live in that world where it's so easy to just find something you don't like about somebody. And when
Yeah.
you retrain yourself to find something that you do like about them or something unique that's special about them, it's a total just game changer for your life and your perspective on everything.
And it's like I try to, when I don't like to say negative situations come my way. I just, a situation which would have upset me in the past, I try, when they come to me, I try to think about it and like what in this can I be grateful for? And I had the other day, and I'd put a post up about this. The other day I got some just news that irritated me, and it set me off just in my head. And I was a lot of my father's anger, it was taught and was passed on to me. Like I never was physical with anybody, but just the anger that, you know, just builds up and you bottle it up, you don't ever deal with it. And this is just last week, like something hit me the wrong way, and it set me off on this that mental journey, like all the just bullshit. Like you just get more mad, and you think about it some more, and like you just get pissed off. And it's one of those moments, like if you drop something on the floor, that's gonna just trigger you. You catch your belt loop on a door handle as you're walking through, it just everything just multiplies times 10. And this went on for 20, 30 minutes, and finally it took a while, but I was able to, like, wait a minute, like just stop. Like, why? What are you getting upset about? And I stopped, and I went somewhere quiet, and I meditated and just focused on my breath, and for about another 20, 30 minutes. And afterwards I'm like, there's there's no point in ruining the rest of my day for something that I can't change right now. There's no point in me being pissed off until where I don't get good sleep for something that I can't change right now. And also waking up in the morning, and it was work related, but I was able to reset my mind and just stop the anger from, and just the thoughts and the racing and everything. And then I, I the rest of my day was fine. I went to
Yeah.
work the next morning. The problem was resolved in 2 hours.
Yeah. And in
So, I
so
mean,
much, go ahead.
I mean, that was, I mean, what, 12, 14, 16 hours there that I would have just spent pissed off and sleeping terribly on my bed if I had just let the old course, that
Mhm.
the the pattern that's been put into my brain for so long, if I'd have just let it keep going. But I was able to see that, disrupt it, and let's start over, wipe the slate off, think about this. And now I can look at that situation, and I'm grateful that it happened, because I learned a hell of a lesson in that.
Yeah,
I mean, like I said,
absolutely.
I was irritated when it happened, but I can look at it now, and I'm truly grateful that happened, because it's just another learning opportunity for me. It's another opportunity to build my skill set on.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a taught thing. Like you have to, it's a muscle, right? You have to strengthen that
Yeah.
muscle so you can do it. Because I used to carry all those things home with me from work. I tried not to. I would even talk to people about how they shouldn't do that, but I still did. And then it
Oh
just
yeah.
comes out in the most inopportune ways because it causes you to be frustrated and angry and lash out. And then if you're not careful, that little stupid thing that caused that for an hour, 2 hours, your whole day, you sleep like crap that night because of it. And then it goes into your next day. And before you know it, you're just in a bad space and you don't even remember why.
And it snowballed.
Yep.
I mean, it just keeps on going. And then even if you do remember why, every little thing it just
Just
keeps
stacks up.
snowballing. And
Yep.
then next thing you know, like you said, you're like, what the fuck is
Yeah.
going on?
Yeah,
And
at some point you have to reset it or you just are stuck in it. And
yeah,
there's so many things that just are available to teach that, to just release it, whether it's
yeah,
meditation, breath work, focused breathing, grounding, you name it, whatever works for you. I mean, some people just literally they'll go just take a drive around the block with the windows down and the music cranked, and that's enough to just unplug for 5 or 10 minutes and they're
I
good.
wish that worked for me.
Yeah, I mean, I hear people talk about that. They're like, no, I just go have a cigar and drive down the highway for 20 minutes and come back and I'm good. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, like I enjoy a good drive, but for
I
me,
would make
like,
it 19 miles and then somebody would cut me off and then it would
it,
just
right, yeah. And then now you're spooled back up. You're just coming down and then spike back.
yeah.
But I mean, all
But
those things
yeah,
are good.
and
But
then so where I was an officer at, I had you were talking about taking things home. That's what made me think about it. So when I was an officer, I lived probably I think it was like a 31 or a 32-minute drive away. So most days it gave me some time to kind of just unwind and just let everything go. And one guy, he was an officer. He was this class that we were in. He said every day when he got home, he walked up on his porch and he took his hand and he put it up on the porch post. And he's like, "Anybody know why I did that?" And we're like, "No." He goes, "I left everything right there on that post." And then I went into my house. And like you said, I used to preach it to people too. Like, don't take this stuff home. Don't take it to your wife.
mm,
Um, don't take it to your kids. I mean, if you have a wife who's and they talk a lot about this in law enforcement, like don't don't just go dump all this shit on your spouse
yeah,
because not only is that a heavy load for them to bear, but they see it from a different perspective because
mm,
that's the person that they love and you're going away every day and they have more worry there. And but if you have a spouse that you like, it's something you should have a conversation about. Hey, if you want to know what goes on at work, I'm more than happy to tell you, and that's something that we can discuss. Um, but don't just throw it all on them.
yeah. And
I
as
mean,
much as they're eager to help, they don't,
yeah,
because they're at it from a different perspective, that it's so easy for them to just be that dumping ground and just
yeah,
leave all that on them because they don't really understand how to process that or even what to say.
yeah,
And there's always that desire when somebody's in a bad space to help, and when you don't have the tools to actually help them, it makes you feel so much worse. So it's
yeah.
just not an effective tool.
Luckily, like this I've been married before and divorced,
Mm,
and I'm a police statistic, but like my wife now, she worked in the industry as well, so she understood. She wasn't a cop, but she worked in there taking all these calls and everything, and she even had a different side of stress because she knew the type of stuff that comes in and that I go out and do that most officers wouldn't go tell their spouse, and she knows. And especially me, I was always very proactive. Like I enjoyed going out and putting shitheads in jail, and
mm,
I think a lot of that had to do with how I was raised.
mm.
Like, and there's a difference between shitheads and people that make bad decisions.
Yep.
Um, I'm sure you could watch the news and point out a few shitheads, but like being the kid that grew up and didn't have much chance to make it anywhere, but still able to do it. Now I'm an officer, and I would go out every day, and maybe the drugs that I got off the street, or maybe this guy that's going to jail is not going to go home and beat his son tonight, or beat his daughter tonight, or the drugs that I'm taking off the street. I mean, I'm not naive enough to think that there's not more drugs out there, but every day at the end of shift, I looked back and like, did I do my part to try to help? And most days I did. Some days, everybody has rough days, but most days I did. And it's something that, like I said, I really enjoyed being a cop and just trying to make changes. I wasn't a ticket writer. I hated tickets.
Yeah. Yeah, you don't make friends writing tickets. I mean, you can like I talked a little bit I think before the call about selling tickets where
Yeah,
you can turn it around and make them feel like you're cutting them a break and a deal and they'll actually be kind of happy about it. But
yeah.
in the end, like I don't know that the ticket always fixes the issue.
It
And
it
it
most of the
definitely
time
depends
it
on who the recipient is, but
like I tell you, like I said, I was highly focused on narcotics, and then I'd say DWIs. We didn't have a lot. There was
mm,
no major highway through our town. We were kind of just off the beaten path. So there were some DWIs if somebody lived there and they were headed home, or somebody had through like a little house party. But we didn't have any bars.
mm,
It was just a smaller community. But my main focus was narcotics, and I did really well at it, and I learned how to read body language, and I learned how to communicate with people, and I even learned, all these deception techniques and everything. And you go to all these trainings, and it's something that I enjoyed. Like you go in and you have a conversation with somebody, and now, like I was telling you, I work in sales now, and it's a skill that translated very well into sales is being able to communicate with people. And you could show anybody empathy. Like
mm.
you show somebody empathy. You don't have to be sympathetic for whatever they got going on, but you can show people empathy. And I don't know where I was going down that rabbit hole, but um, like I would deal with some people, and they'd be like, "Well, I didn't have a chance in life. This is just where I'm at." And I'm like, "No, man. Like that excuse, it don't work with me." I was like, "Everywhere you're at in life right now, every choice you've ever made has led you to right here." I was
Yep.
like, "Life is about choices. You can make the choice right now to leave all this shit behind, whether it's drugs or, you know, abuse, whatever it is. You can make a choice to change that." I was like, "I came from the same shit. We're probably relatives, but I made the choice. I saw what was happening. I made the choice to get the hell out of there. That's something that's not how I wanted to live my life."
Mm,
I was like, "You can do the same." And I was telling you about my brother that died. My brother went down that road, like in high school, started hanging out with the wrong people, and then started stealing like pills from, family members. And then next thing you know, it was drug, like hard narcotics and meth, and just out running around, running from the police. I mean, he's told me stories like he ran from the cops and got away. And I'm like, "You're an idiot."
yeah.
And like I said, he died in November, but his last year and a half, he was spent clean. He'd gotten in trouble, and he went to in Texas. They have a thing called safe no Safe P is what it's called. It's a program. It's a part of the Texas prison system. It is a prison, but it's rehabilitation. It's all drug offenders, and it's basically, your last chance. You go through all these programs, and he did. He changed his life. He turned his life around and left all that behind. And like, even when we talk about gratefulness, I'm able to look back now at my brother's death, and I'm grateful that he had that last year and a half to mend fences with family members, to rebuild the relationships that have been broken because of drugs and bad choices. Like, it took me a long time to be able to be grateful for something like that. But when you could look at something like that and be grateful for it, it'll totally turn your mind around.
Absolutely. And it is a change, it is a choice. And I think virtually everybody can look back at times in their life when they made poor choices and they either just chose to say, well, I got away with it and keep doing it, or
Hmm.
learn the lesson or just decide that, hey, I didn't like that feeling of being that close to being in trouble or that close to tragedy, whatever it may be, and
Yeah.
making the choice to just walk away from it. And I actually think that mental health is no different. I mean,
Oh yeah.
for whatever reason that we end up in the dark spot in the bad place that we don't think we can escape, we have to make the choice to either sit in it or do something about it.
Yeah.
And and it's really easy to play the victim and say like, well, all
Mm-hmm.
these things got me here, and so this is where I'm at. But in reality, you have the choice. You have the choice
Yeah.
to take action about it and do something about it. Even though, like, I mean, I can look back and I know that when you're in that spot, like you really do feel alone. You really do feel like there's no hope.
Yeah.
But it's just that first step. And it's the first step is sometimes the hardest, but just take that first step and then take the next. And just worry
Yeah.
about taking the first step. And it's a
Once you
catalyst.
get that momentum, it carries.
Absolutely. And like I was talking with my therapist about this last month that she had noticed this progression of where, because this has been a multi-year process for me of just like I'd get good, then more trauma, and I'd come back down and just kind of flow up and down. And then she goes, then there was this point where like you switch treatments and you were just kind of on this steady rise. And then all of a sudden you just went way up and you just like your momentum is just exponential. And that's because you've
Yeah.
just put in so much effort into it that it just continues to grow and grow and grow. And you gain that speed and that momentum. And at that point you really find yourself like, I guess, being open to more ideas of how to improve and how to be better and how to heal, to where you'll
Yeah.
just try anything that's going to add value to your life.
And I think a lot of people get lost when it comes to the medications because,
Mm,
I still take a medication. It's something that I have to work my way down. I can't, it's one of those, you can't just stop it. But the medication's not the end all be all.
mm,
That medication is supposed to help you get that little first step up and get a little bit of clarity so you can make the changes in your life that you need.
mm,
I've never heard of any medication that, it's all sunshine and rainbows after you take it. Like, people say stuff, oh, well, this medication does this. I'm like, no, taking it. Like I mean, it kept me from putting a gun in my mouth.
mm.
Just to be frank, I mean, it
Yeah.
kept me from killing myself. Like I've been at that point. Like I didn't want to live anymore. I mean,
Yeah.
it kept me from killing myself. So yes, it did help, but it's not just the end result for you. That's something just to help you take that first step.
Yeah. It's just the catalyst, right? It's just that one thing
Yep.
gets you going, gets you started. Whether it's the medication, whether it's the phone call to the therapist or phone call to a friend or just and really I think the step before that we've failed to talk about is just acknowledging that there is something wrong,
Yeah.
because we can fight it in our minds. We're really good at that. And then to sit there and fight it and be like, nope, I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine. But when you finally admit, no, something's wrong, and that's often when that's rock bottom, I think, for a lot of people. That's
Yeah.
often when you hit that spot when you're like, oh yeah, okay, something's wrong.
Yeah.
And so that's that first step that you really don't change anything necessarily, but it's the step that you've made the acknowledgement. So now you can take the first step to
Yeah.
correcting what's wrong.
You found the ladder. Now you just got to
Exactly.
climb your
Yeah.
way out.
Yeah. That's exactly. Yeah. You found the
Yeah.
freaking ladder. Now you
You're
got to
still at the
start.
bottom. You can see the ladder. You know how to climb one. You just got to take that first step.
Yeah. That's it right there. So,
But go ahead.
no, I just, that's a great analogy.
I
And,
pulled it out of my ass.
and hey, that's where they come from. That's where all good analogies come from.
It just hit me, and I was like, "Oh, I like that."
Yeah. So what's next for you? I mean, you've put in a lot of work, and obviously, like I feel like we all have hard days. That's just part of life. But we once we
So,
develop those tools, we're able to combat that effectively or more effectively.
and that's what I want to help people do is put these tools out there for tell people about them. They're out there. I mean,
Mm,
anybody can do a Google search, but reading something online or watching a YouTube video is different than somebody talking to you or somebody talking to me, because that's a two-way. There's accountability there. There's a sense of vulnerability, because watching it, I could watch a YouTube video about how to fix my depression while I'm laying in my bed in the darkness, and then turn my phone off and never do anything about it.
Mhm.
But when you take that step to have a conversation with somebody, it's a that can offer you some tools, it goes a lot further. And that's something that, like, I'm still learning. I practice this stuff every day, and my hopes in the future I can also help people, work their self out of the same shit that I was going through. I've thought a lot about, like, where my focus would go, and it probably end up being in the first responder community, just
Hmm.
the way I am and the type of people that I relate very well to. Just because I can understand, and that's what a lot of it is I can understand the shit that they're going through, the shit
Yeah.
they see at work, because and a lot of people can't. Like, a lot of people don't deal with trauma and just people at their worst day in and day out. But EMS and the firefighters and all police, it's just, you see everybody at their worst. Nobody
Yeah.
calls the cops when they're in a good mood. I
Yeah.
mean, they call the cops when they're pissed off, or somebody just killed somebody, or it's just, there's a big stigma around mental health
Mhm.
and the first responder community, especially cops, because cops are carrying guns around, and they hold a lot of weight and responsibility in what they're doing.
When
And
especially with the camera always being on them at this day and
yeah,
age, there is no, I mean, when I got into the fire service and when I did a little bit of law enforcement work, uh, there wasn't, like, cell phones existed, but not to the, like, the
yeah,
iPhone was just coming out. It wasn't in everybody's
yeah.
hand. And now, like, you can't go anywhere without somebody having a phone put up,
Oh yeah.
especially if you're in any of those fields. I mean, everybody wants to record that because they think they're going to get the
TikTok views.
something, yeah. And
Yeah.
especially as an officer, I mean, you're trying to enforce laws and you have a camera pointed at you at all times. And that's just a lot of
Yeah.
added pressure. Plus, most departments now, virtually all of them, put a camera on the officer.
Oh yeah.
So
And I
so
had
now
one.
you know that everything that you're saying is being recorded, and you can see what your what the person that you're dealing with is saying and hear what they're saying and doing. So it's all recorded. So there's so much pressure to just, I have to get everything just right
Yeah.
because it's all there. And and heaven forbid you should forget to hit the record button.
Well, there's a lot of redundancy built into stuff like that.
There is.
Um, like, even like ours, the dash camera, as soon as you, like, if there's, let's say you got into a fender bender and that
Mm,
impact on the vehicle, that's starting the camera, and it automatically records 30 seconds back.
mm,
You turn the lights on, the camera automatically comes on. That camera, sometimes they had issues, but it's supposed to sync with your body camera. I mean, there's a lot of redundancy. It's not picture perfect. I mean,
mm.
things have changed since I got out. It's been, what, a year and a half, 2 years since I've been out of it. Um, but like you said, I mean, it never, like, it didn't bother me to have a camera. It
Mm.
worked out greatly in my favor multiple times, because people would call and complain, and they were like, "Oh, this officer, he's an asshole. He called me this name, or whatever. He did this, that, and the other." And then my supervisor would go watch the video, and he'd call him back, be like, "I got the video right here. This is
Yeah.
he didn't call you anything. I mean, I'm watching it. You want to come watch it with me?" And then just fucking hang up. Like I said, it always worked well in my favor. I was one of
Mm,
those. I didn't really give a shit if people were watching me. It's because I know the type of person that I am.
mm.
I'm going to do the right thing.
Yeah.
That's just the integrity in me. Are there bad cops out there? Yeah, but I can tell you right now, nobody hates a bad cop more than a good cop.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
it's yeah, because you're tarnishing the badge that I wear as well.
Mhm.
And like it's just and I when I became a cop, I quit watching the news just because,
Oh yeah.
like you said, you worked in the fire service. You see so much trauma and negativity and just
Yeah, you don't want to see it
bullshit
anymore.
every single day. No, I don't want to go home and watch it.
Yeah.
Like I'd have like family members that go over their house and they're watching like live PD or something. I'm like, I can't watch this shit. Like I live
Yeah.
live PD. Like this is what I do. I don't
Yeah.
want nothing to do with it.
Yeah. And it's the
But
same
yeah,
with me for like gory movies. Like I've already seen that in real life. Like
yeah,
the blood, the guts, and the gore. I don't want to see Hollywood's recreation of it.
no, because I'm the type of asshole. I'm like, that's not what that looks like.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
then
but
people are
but at
like,
the same
oh
time, I just don't want to see it. Like I've just
no,
but yeah, I'm the same way. Like people talk about like watching Chicago Fire, and I just shake my head. I'm like, never, never, never watched it, never gonna watch it. And
no,
it'd be the same as like I saw Backdraft before I was a firefighter. And
oh
then
yeah,
you watch it after you're a firefighter and you're like, what in the fuck is this shit? Like,
yes,
what a bunch of
yes,
crap. And so then you just
yes.
it kind of does ruin some movies for you that otherwise were good movies before. But yeah, I just I can't do it anymore.
No, and I was the same way because if I watched a movie that had cops in it, like, what the fuck's he do? You don't. That's not how you do that. Because
Yeah.
I was on our SWAT team as well. You know, you go through training on entry, just all these different training, and I'm like, the fuck is he doing? That's the dumbest
Yeah.
shit I've ever seen.
Yeah.
It'll ruin a movie for you.
Oh
Just
yeah.
like you said, like you can't watch anything fire related. It'll ruin a movie for you real
Yeah.
quick.
Yeah, real quick.
But like going back to what I was talking, like with first responders and the stigma that's around there is like they're afraid to lose their job, and they shouldn't be. If they're willing to reach out and get help, there's way too many like first responder related suicides every year
Mhm.
because and I've been there. Like like I had depression, but that's not something that you feel like you could talk about because well, what if I lose my job?
Mhm.
Like I don't want to say anything. Like I mean, it wasn't like I wanted to blow my brains out at that time, but like I got some issues and it'd be nice to talk to somebody, but what happens if I go talk to a therapist or somebody and somebody's uncle's brother's sister fucking knows somebody at the police department. Next thing you know, I'm fired
Yeah. And that's the
because
thought
I
we
got
have
to
anyway.
yeah,
I mean,
and like you said, that's the thought that we have. It's some places, some departments are probably pickier about who they hire and who they would keep on for those things. But luckily, I work for a department that, I wasn't the only one.
mhm.
Some of the people that have been doing this job for 20, 30 years, they understand. Like they've seen the shit too. And they know what you go through. And luckily my department was that way. Not all of them are.
Yeah,
And
I think it's changing, and in the end, like if you go talk to a therapist, that therapist legally cannot divulge what you say unless you're talking to them about breaking laws. Like
yeah,
if you're telling them that you're doing illegal stuff or like abusing somebody physically, sexually, like they're gonna be like, oh no, yeah,
yeah,
I'm a mandatory reporter. It's no different than being a first responder. There's certain things that while HIPAA laws apply that protect the patient, they protect you when you're the
yeah.
patient's the therapist. But there's certain things that if it goes down on a call, you're like, yeah, no, that gets reported. Like,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, this
But
kid's
like,
got battle wounds. Like, obviously he's been abused. That gets reported. It's not
oh,
just
yeah, without a
no,
doubt.
it was probably just a one-time thing. You don't get to make that choice. You report it.
And I think like with me talking to anybody, it comes from, being very cynical. Everybody, when you work in, you're a first responder, working in law enforcement, you become very cynical of every situation out there,
Yep.
and it's just the amount of trust that you could put out, or that it's not much. You don't feel like you could trust anybody. I don't feel like I could trust a therapist. Like you said, they're not legally allowed to do that. Well, I arrest people all the time that are legally not allowed to do whatever they're doing, but they still do it. So it's like you have that trust, the lack of trust, and you're like, nah, I don't trust nobody. I'm not going to talk to anybody. I mean, it shouldn't be that way. I mean, and like you said, think times are changing. Luckily, I mean, people have gotten a lot better at understanding those situations, but to the ones that haven't, it's going to take some work. And then, like I said, I also want to be there for the people, the individuals that are going through situations that need that help, because I've been in the darkest depths of depression, and you shouldn't be carrying a gun around. Like, you're not that I feel like you're going to take somebody's life, but you're not in the best shape to protect yourself from whatever you may run into.
Yeah, your head's not straight at the moment. You've got
No.
too much stuff going on where you're just not focused. You're hyper focused on the trauma that you're dealing with. And that's
Yeah.
no difference with any of the first responders, that your head isn't really in the game because you're
Yeah.
dealing with all those things and you're just kind of partially there. And it's a dangerous spot to be.
Yeah.
And that's where having a good employer that will back you up, and most of them are getting there, where you can get the help you need, or just even being willing to reach out to somebody like you or like me. I mean,
Yeah.
I get people who reach out and just kind of look for like, okay, what do I do? How do I start? And so I'll
Yeah.
work with people on that and just give them some accountability tasks of things to get done. And it's not me telling them what to do. It's just me very much like telling them what the options are and letting them go, oh, I think I can do that. That sounds like something I
Yeah.
would be okay with trying. And it's just to get started, right?
Yeah.
And whatever that is. And a lot of times it can just be a coworker, that a seasoned veteran that's been around for a while, that has that experience. And certainly I'm a big proponent, if you are that seasoned veteran and you've had those experiences and you've been through that. I mean, when I first started dealing with PTSD, I didn't want to talk about it. The
Yeah.
first person I told was my supervisor, and that was so hard. And then slowly I would talk about it with other coworkers and other people on the department. And then eventually I got to the point where I'm teaching a class on resiliency
Yeah.
and how to best help those, and you help yourself and things you can do. And it just snowballed from there. But just being willing to talk about it, if you're that seasoned veteran, that goes a long way, because people look up to you, even if you're the crusty old captain or the lieutenant, or you're just the one that always seems bitter. And you know, that's some of that's just who you are, and that's okay. Like, I'm the older I get, the crankier I get, probably, in some with some of the stuff I do. But it's how I deal with it that matters, right? Like, we can all feel that
Yeah.
way, but how we actually deal with it, and being willing to just check in on the new guys, or any, even not the new guys, anybody on the department. They're like, hey,
Yeah.
how are you doing after that? Like, was that all right? Like, no, really, like, really, how are you doing? Like, you want to talk about it? Is there anything I can do? Doors always open. You got my number.
Yeah.
And just being willing to be in that position goes a long way, because that sets the stage to not have that stigma.
And I think, like, it's with a lot of, you know, guys that have been in it for a while, I think they're scared as well, as far as, opening theirself up to be that mentor, that set of open ears, because that's not something they probably didn't have that whenever, they were coming up through those first few 4, 5, 6 years. Like, because like you said, we've progressed a long way when it comes to mental health and help and
Mm-hmm.
everything else. And if they've been there 20, 25 years, there wasn't as much, resources available back then. So they had to bottle shit up for a long time. They have the
Mm-hmm.
knowledge, but are they able to share the wisdom is
Yep,
another thing. And do they feel safe sharing that wisdom?
absolutely. And it's just all a taught thing. And some of it we have to teach ourselves, and we have to be willing to talk about it. And um, I would have never guessed that I'd be the one being a mouthpiece for mental health. I mean, I
Me
flat
neither.
out didn't. Like, even a year ago, I was like, I think I'm going to talk about this. I'm like, yeah, I don't really think I am. Like, I don't know. Like, but then really kind of got some pressure to talk about it. And then I was like, oh, okay, yeah, what the hell? I'm gonna share my story. And then it just grew. But just being willing to goes a long way. And I think
Yeah.
regardless of where you're at, too, you're the new guy and you saw something that just rocked you to the core. Talk about it. Talk
And
about it with somebody you work with a therapist, anybody.
I was that kind of person. Even dealing with my own issues, before I made the changes in my life, like when I was a cop, like I would see some of the newer guys go through some of these calls where you're like I know it's rough on me. They've been here for 6 months. Like that's the
Mm,
first, and I know it's rough on them. And I would let it breathe a little bit and then go talk to him. Like, hey man, how's it going? How you holding up? And just kind of start a conversation, and then you kind of get a good feeling on how they're dealing with things.
mhm.
Um, because it's there's some rough ones, like you said. You've seen some traumatic things too. There's body parts aren't where they're supposed to be. I mean, it's just there's so much to it. Like I had one call, and I think I'd been at the department for like 8 months, and we get a call. This guy just pointed a gun at the clerk at one of the gas stations. Well, when they gave us a description, we knew who it was just by what the tattoos and physical features and all that. And we were right down the road. Well, we ended up getting a pursuit. He's running and driving like a maniac through fences, through fields, hitting all kinds of stuff. And at one point he stops in the street. And this is like I said, I was a young officer, and this is one of the calls that it got to me for a long time. Is he stopped in the middle of the street, kind of at an angle. I stepped out, like, and I called him by his name. I knew who he was. I said, "Hey, let me see your hands." And I'm hollering out there, and he's looking back at me out the window right here, just laughing. And you just get like one of those feelings like this ain't good, because that's not a normal reaction. Like most people are like, "Oh, okay," but he's laughing out the window, and I'm like this, and I'm talking like as far as finger on the trigger, ready to go. He comes out the window like this. He turns his body and comes out the window, and it was a fucking bottle of Fireball in his hand. With the way he did it, I'd have been justified in every way you look at it, because he had just pointed a gun at the clerk and everything. And I mean, and it was, I couldn't tell you like
Yeah. Yeah.
how
How much
close. I mean,
slack's left? Yeah.
it was, yeah. There was no slack, and it's just like one of those moments, like, and you think about that shit so much. Like this has been years, and I see it in vivid detail. Like I could put myself right back there, and the facial expression and the label of the bottle. And luckily, I was able to see what it was before I did pull that trigger. And the pursuit continued on. He turned back in the vehicle, and the pursuit continued on. We went through our community for probably 45 to 50 minutes and never got over like 15, 20 mile an hour. Another agency got involved, and they ended up spiking the tires. And there's probably 15 or 20 uh, patrol cars all in this thing. And we didn't really know why there was so much support from, the other agency. But, there's just a bunch of us. And at one point, and then he would stop and everybody get out of their vehicle, then he would go. And he would stop, and it just kept going. It's like, and it got to the point like my my heart rate, my blood pressure was so high when it came to the point that I was about to shoot him, that by the time like towards the end of this pursuit, I'm just sitting there just like, okay, drinking water, like, okay, this shit. And then he stopped again, and I was getting out of the patrol car, and the fucking shots just started going off. turns out he had, and I was, by this point, I'd gotten behind another patrol car. So he ended up, he put a gun out the window, pulled the trigger, and he was shot 6 times. Um, and then drove off. You're like, good God. And then he turned a corner, crashed into a fence. You're like, okay. And everybody's posted up on it. And we get shields and we're getting ready to approach. And he takes off again. And finally, one of the patrol cars rammed him and he got stuck. We made an approach and we pulled the guy out and started, assessing the damage.
Mm.
Cut off all the clothes. He's, like I said, he's riddled. And when he came out, I saw he had one right in the back of his head. I was like, well, he's done. Just so you know, that man is still alive and he's sitting in prison right now. That bullet hit, and it was, so he had a fiberglass back window,
Mm.
real white trash. And it, when the 223 round hit, it started spinning. Well, it hit and traveled and stopped right here on the other side. And I'm like, he was, like I said, he was hit 6 times, one in the back of the head. But just like that whole situation for a brand new officer, I say 8 months, that's brand, I mean, you're, for the first solid 2 years, you really don't have a full grasp on everything.
Yeah.
Like, you're not expected to know everything, but you're expected to be able to figure things out, find your resources, ask the right people. Like, I mean, as long as you can take care of yourself and can find the answers to the questions, that's the point that they say you're good to go. It sounds simple. There's a lot to it, but at 8 months in, I was like, holy shit. And that's a moment that's, it's like I said, it's live with me. And
Yep.
when you're in those dark places, just laying there in bed or sitting in your chair, or whatever else, like this, all this shit just comes back and you just relive it. Reliving when I was 5 years old and, my mother was holding me in the corner, and then, reliving finding somebody that was been in their house gone for 2 weeks, and just shit people aren't supposed to really see.
Yep.
And I think that's a lot of people don't realize about law enforcement is you, I've been to a call, let's just say it this way. I've been to a call where this boyfriend and girlfriend, they wasn't physical, but they just argue. It's the same people. They call a couple times a week.
Yep.
They argue. They always call the cops. And the next day they complain on you because you didn't really care that much about their problem. But what they don't realize is the shit you just came from, the dead people that you just finished dealing with on the last call. There's not time to take a breath after that. There's other calls waiting.
Go right into the next one.
You can compartmentalize and then keep trucking. And it's like, that's what a lot of people don't see is it's a necessary job, but there's got to be some sort of decompression, time to get that shit out to somebody. Because when you just, and I bottled that shit up all the time. When you bottle it up and bottle it up, it finally just, it haunts you. You close your eyes and it's just all you see is these damn moments.
And it's fascinating because as you were talking to me about the vehicle pursuit, I just remembered a call that I don't even know if I've ever talked to my therapist about. Like literally, it's amazing to me when these things like pop up that you've just bottled up and it's so far back and your brain has just stuffed it somewhere. And like I have the tools now where I'm like, yeah, I remember that, but like it's all good. But
yeah,
like I'm amazed that I because it was a significant call involving a shooting. And as I was an EMT on the call, and I'm like, I just can't even believe that just popped into my head. And it's so random. And the whole thing was just that, you said the guy got shot and he survived. This guy tried to shoot himself. They were in a big pursuit. They got one of them, and the other guy went down the embankment, pretty significant. We're in mountain country, and was like 100, 200 feet down the hill, and he shot himself in the face. Tried to tried to be done and commit suicide so he wouldn't go to jail, and he survived.
Uh,
And I'm like, holy crap, I can't even believe I forgot about that. But
and
it's
it's
amazing that
crazy.
that's how the brain works. That is, I mean, that was, geez, I don't know, like 2006, maybe 2010, somewhere in there. I don't really know.
And
Probably
it's fun.
2006, 2008, long, long time ago.
And as many traumatic stories as there are, there's also just mounds and mounds of hilarious stories and
Oh yeah,
stupid moments. And I'm sure you're aware. And that's what's like, I can sit down with, some friends of mine, since I've left, and um, used to, I haven't drank anything in quite some time, but we would drink a beer and just start telling stories.
yeah,
And while somebody else is telling a story just like yours, you think about this funny story. You're like, oh shit, I'm going to tell this one next. And it's like you said, it's crazy how all this shit just gets stored in the brain, and you might not think about it for years and years and years, but as soon as you do, it's there as vivid, like it's like it happened.
yeah, yeah. It's incredible, and I think that's like, to me, that's like just a great example of how your brain does compartmentalize those things and store
Yeah.
them away. And they will come up when they decide. Because whatever it was that you
Hmm.
said, I think it was just that he had taken a gunshot wound in the front and it spun around and grazed, that brought that back.
Yeah.
And those things, we don't always know what's going to be the trigger. But if we deal with those things up front and allow them to be processed before our brain decides, hey, you're gonna process this right now. Like
Yeah.
you do it now, or you don't get to decide when it all comes out. And
Yeah.
I think that's an important thing, and how we deal with it. And I think that certainly you've voiced it, and want people to be able to reach out to you if they need to talk, especially like the law enforcement guys are going to relate to you a lot better than
Yeah.
they are me, being mostly in fire. But likewise, like anybody, reach out to Michael, reach out to me.
Oh
um
yeah.
and if they wanted to reach out to you or just learn more about you or just anything, how would be the best way to do that?
I'm more on Facebook than I am anything. I mean, I'll give you. I mean, we could put my email that I gave you. I mean, we could put that in the notes. It really doesn't bother me. I mean, anybody
Okay.
can reach out to me.
Okay.
Michael D Collins on Facebook. I put the D in there just because so many. There's 1,000 Michael Collinses out there, so maybe be a little bit easier to find. Um, it's Michael Collins on or Instagram, but I can't remember what my actual username
and
is on there.
and I've got you
I
on.
follow you so they could find me through you could find me through your Instagram and your Facebook because
Yeah.
we're friends on it. But it's one of them. I wish it would be nice to have an uncommon name sometimes
Yeah.
other than Michael Collins, the famous Irish revolutionist, or Michael Collins, the Apollo 11 astronaut who got to stay in the shuttle when Neil Armstrong went and walked on the moon. There's a bunch of us.
But and I'll put everything in the show notes there. Get your socials out there and stuff, and that way people can reach out to you if they want. And
Oh yeah, I'm more than happy to talk to people.
like Michael's a pretty awesome guy. He did not hang out in Apollo 11, unfortunately, but
Not this one.
not this
But
one.
you know how irritating that would be is if you had this lifelong dream to be an astronaut and then you finally went to space and then the other two guys got to go walk on the moon and you had to
Right.
stay up there and wait for them to come back.
And I'm sure he was doing something important. I don't
Oh
know what
yeah.
that
Yeah.
something
I mean
important was. It just wasn't camera worthy.
yeah, it was oh shit.
Yeah. Yeah. Come on. Best 2 out of 3.
Yeah.
Nobody did that. No, come on.
Best
Okay,
two out
three
of
out of
three.
five.
Flip a coin.
Yep. So Michael, I appreciate you coming on, and I think we've had a really great conversation. If you had
Oh
one
yeah.
thing to say to anybody who's in that dark space and they're not sure what to do, where to turn, what would you say to them?
Take the first step and talk to somebody, whether it's, somebody that you feel can help guide you in the right direction, whether it's a therapist. There's all kinds of people that talk about, put their, like you do, like I do. We put our stories out there in hopes that it inspires somebody. They see that, like, I have people reach out to me. They're like, "Hey man, like, I'm going through some shit. You might no, let's talk, because I've been
Absolutely.
there, and I'm here to help you through it. I can't make you go through it. It's a journey that you have to take, but I will help you any way I can." But finding somebody to talk to and just get those thoughts out. Um, I say that, and put it on paper. It's something weird about
Yeah.
taking those thoughts that are racing and just writing. No structure needed. Nobody gives a damn if you put periods or exclamation points in there. Nobody. It's not for anybody to read. It's for you. It's to give those thoughts somewhere else to live, besides, right in the front of your mind. And that's helped me a lot. Everything's helped me out. It's one of them things, but to help get some of those thoughts out, if you're not to the point where you feel like you could talk to somebody yet, just put them on paper. Talk to the paper, write it down, and just spill all those thoughts out. Write for as long as you can write. And then and like I said, it's kind of like we couldn't explain the feeling of meditation. Like, it's hard to explain that feeling when you put everything on paper like that, and it's just, you feel a little bit free from those thoughts that you just put out there. And at that point, you could take that little bit of freedom you have, get out and talk to somebody. And then you took a step, you take another step, you take another step, and look for guidance along the way. There's a lot of resources out there. There's a lot of people that will help you. There's a lot of people you could pay to help you, but there's also a lot of people that'll help you for free. Like I said,
Yeah.
I have people call me all the time. I work a job. I work a 9 to 5, but I also, anybody that comes to me for help, that's I'll help you any way I can. Like I said, I can't make the journey for you, but I can tell you what's helped me, the tools that I've used to help me and help you get through it.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Um, Again, I appreciate you coming on, Michael, and sharing your story. And again, you guys, you need to reach out to somebody. Michael's available. I'm available. Everybody who's been on this podcast at one time or another is happy to help and happy to be there to help you on the journey and get started. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. And please remember to like, follow, share this podcast. Let's spread it far and wide so we can help more people. And we'll catch you next week on another episode of Freeing Your Mind podcast. Love y'all. God bless.